Hi, I'm Max Kaiser. Welcome to On the Edge. Now let's get right to it. Let's go to New York and speak with David DeGraw of ampedstatus.com. David, welcome back to On the Edge.
Thank you, Max. Always a pleasure to be on with you.
I interviewed you here on the Edge a year ago. You first mentioned the 99% movement. Tell us how the Occupy Wall Street sprung out of that, what inspired you, and what your aims are. Kind of a big question, but hopefully you can cover that.
Well, Max, as you know, in February 2010, we started this thing called the 99% movement. And basically, it grew out of a book that I wrote, or a series of online reports that were investigating the economic crisis and really explored how poverty and wealth inequality has just exploded. I mean, it's happened over a 35-year period, but certainly since 2007 crisis kicked in going forward, it's just exploded. The gap between the top 1% and the remaining 99% of the population is the most severe it's ever been. We've had U.S. millionaire households have a total wealth of $46 trillion. Breaking it down even further, only 0.1% of the U.S. population makes over $1 million a year. And breaking it down even further, as you guys know, 400 people in the United States have as much wealth as 154 million Americans, which is half the population. And when we originally put forward the idea of a 99% movement, the statistic of 400 compared to 154 million was kind of the driving piece that people picked up on. But, the evolution from that, there was thousands of people online who submitted what they thought, quote unquote demands or a platform should be. And in that process, it really came down to what we called a system of political bribery, which was campaign finance, lobbying, and the revolving door between Washington and Wall Street, and also breaking up the banks. So getting money out of politics, breaking up the banks. There was a Brown-Kaufman amendment that was put forward last year during financial reform, which called for breaking up the banks. And that was on the infamous May 6th date where we had the flash crash. That's another thing that you and I had discussed in the past. But, it really evolved from this wealth inequality concept and uniting people of all different walks of life, all different political viewpoints, against the global financial oligarchy that we consider as occupying our current government and governments throughout the world. We live in a global economy, and there is a neoliberal aristocracy which runs the global economy, and it's not a conspiracy theory. It's there for anyone who wants to do the research. Between the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF, the Federal Reserve, the World Bank, and the big banks on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, Citigroup. I mean, J.P. Morgan, of course, as you always like to talk about. I mean, this is a global financial oligarchy that has seized control of governments throughout the world. They control the global economy, and this is all about uniting people across the world against this global financial oligarchy.
All right, so David DeGraw, two concepts that are big during this movement, wealth concentration and inequality, certainly are two phrases that are used quite frequently. But another phrase that people, I think, need to talk about or should talk about, and it goes back to our discussions that we've been having, as you point out, over a year now. It goes back even longer than that. But when you have within an economy something that's growing at the rate of a cancer, that is to say, the wealth aggregation of the most corrupt, the kleptocratic upper class, that's anti-competitive. I would think that anyone who believes in the American system at all, or the free market enterprise system at all, would recognize this aggregation of wealth by the top 1% at this rate of wealth aggregation is completely anti-competitive. It's a cancer on the system. Wouldn't everyone want to get rid of cancer?
Absolutely. I mean, look, we say the 99% movement, but it really is 100% of us. We're all on this Titanic together. And this is something that has really been coming up a lot lately, that, there's people well within the top 1% and people who have this, libertarian free market perspective who have been coming forward and offering to help us, because everyone knows the system is broken, the system is corrupt. This movement that's happening worldwide is an inevitable reaction, and it's like the human survival instinct is kicking in here. So, free market libertarians are huge supporters of this movement because they realize, even mid-level hedge fund people, hedge fund managers I talk to, they want this movement to succeed because they see how the market has been rigged by a very small percentage of the global population. This neoliberal aristocracy, it lives. It has names, Tim Geithner, Ben Bernanke, Jamie Dimon, Lloyd Blankfein, Hank Paulson, Robert Rubin. We know who these people are who have set up this system. And, people well within the top 1% also know, and they don't want to be lumped in with these people. So they're coming forward to help us in amazing ways. So over the next few months and through the winter, you're going to see much better organization throughout this Occupy Wall Street movement. And I cannot wait for the spring because we're going to be an unstoppable force. And the only people giving us resistance are going to be the Tim Geithners and the Ben Bernankes and the Jamie Dimons of the world. And by the way, we had some great direct actions where we went to Jamie Dimon's house on the Upper East Side, and we went to John Paulson's house on the Upper East Side. Sunday, we had a contingent of people go to Mayor Bloomberg's Upper East Side estate. We're taking it to them in a non-violent manner. So, there's all sorts of different strategic maneuvering happening. And like I said, I was so depressed running up to September 17th. We had the June 14th event where we had 23 cities, a Move Your Money campaign, and it was the first time we tried to occupy Liberty Park. And the occupation of Liberty Park on June 14th didn't work out. We didn't have enough support, and that was very depressing. But we kept fighting, and now into September 17th, we picked up a lot of support from people who were protesting Bloomberg back in June as well. That kind of became the New York City General Assembly. But, there's such a confluence of forces here, and I really feel optimistic for the first time. Obviously we're in a deep hole and there's a lot of work to do, but it's happening now. We're pushing in the right direction finally after years.
All right, David DeGraw, a lot of the placards that are being waved by the 1%, either from windows of the Chicago Board of Options Exchange in Chicago or from the windows of the brokerage offices on Wall Street, the message is get a job. But isn't it true, David DeGraw, that if you guys, the Occupy movement, was successful in taking down a financial terrorist like J.P. Morgan, a $130 or $40 billion company, the 10 to 15 banks that would take their place would create 10 to 15 times more jobs. So aren't you actually for creating more jobs by getting rid of these cancers?
Oh, absolutely. We're all about creating new jobs. Obviously, that's what needs to happen. If you add up all the people who are unemployed between part-time workers who want to work full-time and long-term unemployed people who've been kind of forced out of the employment picture, you're looking at something, about 30 million Americans that are in need of work on some level. So, when they sit there and they say get a job, it just shows you how, the bubble of reality that they live in and how, this financial elite indoctrination and groupthink and these pathological talking points, these are people who have been coming out, putting their bodies on the line day in, day out, fighting hard, they've been trying to get work. These are the hardest working people I've ever worked with. And I've worked with some big companies, but I'm telling you, the people involved in this movement, they're like fighting a nonviolent war. They're at it 24/7, working so hard. So when they say get a job, that just shows you how out of touch with reality and embedded in groupthink these people really are.
Let me ask you about what's happening over there in the UK and in London. Protesters in London have now occupied a former UBS building, office facility, and they've turned it into a bank of ideas. Your thoughts, David DeGraw?
It's beautiful. this is Max, as we've discussed many times in the past, this whole philosophy of decentralized, leaderless resistance. The beauty and genius of that philosophy is on display all over the world. I mean, whether it's, occupying UBS to create a bank of ideas, or it's people who are, occupying foreclosed homes, occupying, buildings and making them homeless shelters, just across the board, so many different ways. You had that Hawaiian music artist who was playing background music at the APEC forum where Obama and world leaders were meeting. And he played for 45 minutes a pro-Occupy Wall Street song, We Are Many. And, there's so many different actions. Everyone has a skill to give, something they're passionate about, that they can apply to this global movement.
Sorry to cut in, but let me ask you this question. The Occupy movement, some are saying that they lack, let's say, a set of goals or an agenda. But let me ask you your opinion on something, an observation that I'm making. As the Occupy movements have gained strength all over the world, and there are now 1,000 places around the globe that are having or are affiliated with this Occupy movement, the bankers that are being talked about and targeted by these movements are getting more and more nervous, to the point where they're becoming more and more brazen, to the point where MF Global, for example, is now not just content with engaging in derivatives trading to steal money. They're actually just taking money out of people's accounts directly. They're commingling. They're actually just larcenistically. They're just stealing money directly. So as they become more brazen, and as their crimes become more obvious and more ridiculously over the top, as a result of their nervousness due to the Occupy movements, isn't that part of the strategy to kind of trip them into killing themselves?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the best things that have been happening to this movement are, the illegal, activities, trillions of dollars of fraudulent activity on behalf of companies like MF Global and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. I mean, as we know, Max, this has been happening for years. But, now they're more scared, as you're saying. And also, I might add that the police brutality against the protesters, all these fight backs in fear based on the 1/10 of 1% of the population that is on the run right now from this movement, has only empowered the movement. The first week we had the occupation in Liberty Park, I mean, we were kind of treading water and fighting. And then on September 24th, we had the march where the cops put the girls in the orange nets and then pepper sprayed them in the face. The next day, our numbers doubled. The weekend after that, we were on the Brooklyn Bridge. People got tricked into going by the police into going into the street. 700 were arrested. But the next day, our numbers doubled. The horrible incident by Scott Olson in Oakland when he got hit in the head with a tear gas canister, that was a horrible situation. But again, our numbers doubled. The 84-year-old woman who was pepper sprayed in the face, the college campus in California where, the kids were brutally pepper sprayed just recently. I mean, all these things, even the eviction from Liberty Park that happened last week, I mean, all these things absolutely re-energize the movement. So, when MF Global does something to, reinforce their corrupt position, and when the police state apparatus does something to reinforce their, police state position, the movement just grows. I mean, it is, there's a comedian, Lee Camp, who talks about it's like pouring water on gremlins, because it really is. I mean, every vicious move they make grows this movement.
All right, let me ask you, the CME Group, of course, is one of the self-regulatory bodies for the securities industry and the futures industry. They listed in their recent 10Q that one of the risks to earnings going forward would be the success of the Occupy movements. So this, I would imagine, is a major triumph, because you've actually forced now a major terrorist organization, the CME, to list on their financial filings the fact that they are involved now in financial terrorism, and that's a risk to shareholders and to stakeholders in the organization, correct?
Oh, absolutely, Max. I mean, if they're not factoring in what this movement's going to do to their bottom line, they're insane. Because, look, as I said, once spring 2012, I cannot wait for March 2012 because there's so many powerful things in the pipeline. They better work and double down. But, the best thing they can do is they could start, putting in some accountability. They can start reforming themselves before the inevitable elimination of their business practices occurs, which, we're on the course to happen.
Well, more cops mean more money that is not there to spend, which means more unemployed cops, which means more people at the Occupy movement. So it's a self-feeding phenomenon, which is really fueled by the whole existence of a fake fiat money-driven economy. And as we were just saying a moment ago, if you were to get rid of a J.P. Morgan, for example, there would be many, many thousands of new jobs would be created. But let me ask you about this story that's coming out about the Zuccotti Park, that an LRAD was used, one of these sound cannons. Is that the case? And if so, isn't this only used during military conflicts against hostile occupied populations?
Well, you would think so, but yes, it was used. When they evicted us from the park the other day, they had these out. And also last Thursday for the 2-month anniversary, we had 40,000 people gather in Foley Square, and they did have the LRAD vehicles at that protest. Whether it was just intimidation, I don't know. But they did use them against us on when they evicted us from the park that one night. They won't stop at anything, but, as we keep saying, the more forceful they are, the more people come out.
Yeah, just to give people an understanding of the absurdity of the situation. I mean, here's the Occupy movement surrounding Bank of New York Mellon, which just got caught stealing from the pension accounts of the very cops that are sent in to break up the Occupy movement. So here are the people putting their bodies on the line, their lives on the line, to save the pension accounts from Bank of New York Mellon of the very cops. So the cops are beating up the last hope they have of not having all their pensions stolen by what is now by Harry Markopolos, who exposed Bernie Madoff, a scam where Bank of New York Mellon stole 0.3% of every pension transaction going back 30 years. So the cops should just take that baton and start beating themselves on the head, because that would be a lot more efficient than trying to beat the people trying to save their pensions. What do you think?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, there's a lot of cops that are very supportive of our movement and have been very helpful. There was even a former Philadelphia police commissioner who came down in uniform and protested with us. We're going to see a lot of this moving forward. There's a lot of people. I grew up in a family of police officers. The town I grew up in, there was generations of police officers. And, I have private conversations with these people, and they are very supportive of the movement. The unfortunate thing is that, they're worried about and as you said, it's a wrong way to take it, but they're worried about, keeping their jobs. Even though they might lose their pensions, they're worried about keeping their jobs. But I think we're going to overcome this because, they get it. They really do. And also people like J.P. Morgan, they just gave them, $4.6 million they donated to the police. The big Wall Street firms have this rent-a-cop deal where they have these private deals with the New York City Police Department. So, the financial elite are greasing the wheels to keep the police on their side, but it's not going to happen. Look at all the Marines that have come forward and supported us. Sergeant Shamar Thomas, who had the famous dressing down of the police, saying that these people are fighting for you. This isn't a war zone. Many military members have come forward and really put their own bodies on the line in defense of this movement, and police are starting to do the same. Once we get the police and the military firmly on our side, that's when this battle has been won.
Now, of course, this movement is spread all over the world, and it's has echoes in the Arab Spring, and it has echoes with the indignados in Spain and all over Europe. So are you having much contact with other countries, and is there any plans to go global with some coordinated actions in the spring?
Absolutely. That's definitely happening. There's a lot of organization going on a national level and a lot of organization going on in the international level. I mean, Max, this movement has been so overwhelming. It seriously is. For all of us who are dedicated to this 24/7, I mean, we have so many different projects going, so many different coordination and communication improvements are being made. You know, Max, you and I have been wanting this movement to happen for years, and now that it's finally happened, we still have to keep in perspective that it started, for most people here at least, on September 17th. So these processes need to be further developed and improved, especially communication internationally. And we know it's a priority. We're working on it, and it's going to happen. And yes, in the spring of 2012, we're going to have international coordination, and I'm so looking forward to it. I just hope that I don't get, burnt out by then. But, I mean, it doesn't matter, though. This is leaderless, decentralized resistance, and every time one person gets burnt out, there's another 10 that come in and take their place. So.
All right, now, before we go, tell us about ampedstatus.com. Is that the best place people go to find out more about what you're up to and everything that's connected to this movement?
Well, that has been my primary site, but I'm working on several different projects, one of which is owsnews.org. This is kind of a decentralized news network where we're trying to link up all the occupations so they submit news from their occupations, and there's a voting system and it's similar to Read It, where people can vote and vote things up. So owsnews.org is one of my primary sites right now. But that being said, I'm working on 1,000 different projects.
All right, David DeGraw, we're out of time. Thanks so much for being on The Edge.
Max, Stacy, thank you so much for everything you've done to inspire this movement. I really appreciate it.
All righty. That's going to do it for this edition of On the Edge with me, Max Kaiser. I want to thank my guest, David DeGraw. If you want to send me an email, please do so at ontheedge@presstv.com. Until next time, this is Max Kaiser saying bye, y'all.